when did you first discover the Austrians?
So let's back up a little bit. Obviously, in WWE, we're around our colleagues and our fellow performers, in many cases more than we were our families. I was on the road 250, 300 days a year sometimes. So for whatever reason, this was in the late 1990s, very early 2000s. And I'd always been interested in politics and government and those sort of things. I'd never been interested in economics because I was intimidated by numbers. Yeah. My sister's the mathematician in the family. She actually has an undergraduate degree in math. I didn't speak the math language really well. My degree's in English Lit. So I was intimidated by economics, never took an economics course in any of my formal education. But I had an interest in politics, and I was trying to figure out basically what I believed and who I wanted to align with. And I would read stuff from, quote unquote, both sides of the political right. aisle. So I would read something from conservatives, read something from liberals, and I could pull stuff out that on both sides that I agreed with, but there are things also that I didn't necessarily wasn't comfortable with. Especially this is back, during the Bush years and all the heavy emphasis on social conservatism. Mm-hmm. I knew that I hated taxes and I was a fiscal conservative. I don't call myself a social liberal because that's not the case. I'm a social conservative, but I also felt the government shouldn't be mandating all these things in our personal life. So one day I was talking with one of my coworkers, a guy named Sean Morley, and he told me I sounded like a libertarian. And I told him if he called me names again, I was going to punch him in the mouth because I'd never heard that before. But basically that...
It does sound like an insult.
It does.
Yeah.
But that, I was like, oh, okay. And he explained the Nolan chart, where it's not just the left and right, but it's also up and down as far as freedom versus authoritarianism. So that piqued my interest, and I just kind of went down the rabbit hole. But I started with political theory and really legal theory, and was reading people like more. I actually started Rothbard with the political stuff, not the economic stuff. Same with Ron Paul. But all these people were talking about
like For a New Liberty, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But all these folks were talking about this thing called Austrian economics, and man, I was like, no. I'm not going to go in. I'm not going to go down the calculus hole and read about in the algebra hole and all this math. But then finally, I'm like, well, this seems really important because all these people that I respect in these other areas are talking about it. So I ordered a copy of What Has Government Done to Our Money. Mm-hmm. There's one formula in the entire book, and it's basically the money multiplier and how that affects the money supply based on the reserve ratio of banks. Right? That was it. The rest was about theory and human action before I really knew there was a book called Human Action. That's when I fell in love with it, though, and I realized this is what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
And economics is not about numbers. That's econometrics, which is really a pseudoscience. But human action is actually the study of economics, and you cannot separate human liberty into two different areas of this idea of personal freedom and economic freedom. They're intertwined, and you just can't do that. And the more you kind of go down, especially the Austrian economics hole, you realize that the basis of everything is economic freedom, because it's really how do we use our time, how do we economize our time, and that's every decision we make is based on that. So that's it. And then I ended up reading everything from human action to man, economy, and state, and everything in between. And it changed my perspective, not only about economics, but really about politics as well.
Yeah. Like, and I could spend the next 6 hours talking about this.
Sure.
And I've mentioned this to you before, but I'm working with my friend Peter Boettke, the great Austrian economist at George Mason. And I'm going to be working on a monograph, actually, with Logan on Austrian economics and popular culture, starting with like Ben Rogi and Leonard Reed, and maybe before or after Big Ears. I'm a big fan of your music festival in Knoxville. We could sit down and have some conversations
Sure.
about Austrian economics, because I think, not starting with Ron Paul, but Ron Paul put all those Easter eggs in his speech, just at the time when you could Google and say, who is this guy,
Right.
Ludwig von Mises? And it's just exploded since then. And right now, I would argue that the most persuasive Austrian economists are professional wrestlers and maybe
MMA fighters.
MMA fighters.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to try to talk to him too.
Yeah. Well, the fact that Mr. Money wins the fight and tells the crowd to read Mises, and it's like, what world am I living in right now?
They can have Taylor Swift.
Exactly.
I'll take this.
But look at what's happening with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And he's talking about Hayek, and even though Sol's not necessarily an Austrian, and he's pretty solid with his economics, right? So it's amazing to see how these things, which were once really obscure and just scholarly, how now they've penetrated into pop culture, and you see these figures literally disseminating them to the masses. And as you said, carrying on what Ron Paul did of, hey, you really need to read. And it's not, the wonderful thing about Austrian economics is literally common sense.
Yeah.
And I really think that people are a lot smarter than they give themselves credit for. What happens is you have these experts who basically talk down to people, and you have the forbidden knowledge that only they possess. They don't want, Paul Krugman doesn't want you to understand these things, because if you do, you're going to read his article and say, whatever, dude, you have absolutely no idea what we were talking about. So it is kind of neat to see that we've circumnavigated academia to some extent. I mean, there's some good people there, but it's been through pop culture.
Two or three.
But it's been through pop culture now
that
you see more and more people talking about this issue.
This was the dream of what the internet could do. Like,
I wouldn't, just like you, I would not be. I mean, the way I found out about what his government done to our money and was able to order it was because I had the internet.
Right.
If I hadn't had that, there's no way I would have ever even gone down that rabbit hole.
It levels the playing field,
Sure does.
and perhaps that's why the bad guys are freaking out right now.
I'd say.
Because I think, Elon Musk has been red-pilled, and it's fascinating. I want to talk particularly about Doge and the cool things happening there, but there's this fascinating group of very important, very smart, very influential people who come from the left.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were Democrats. They thought the Democratic Party left them with their radical authoritarianism, but now they're sort of self-educating. And it's not just Elon Musk. There's all sorts of really serious people quoting Ayn Rand and Ludwig von Mises. I'm like,
it's a beautiful thing.
I'm here
isn't
for
it?
it. I'm here for it. So it's pretty cool. But you must feel a little anxious being here in the belly of the beast.
Yeah, I do. We're in Washington D.C., and I always get a little nervous when I come here because it is unfortunately kind of where all this stuff emanates from.
Yeah, and you sent me a very scary article today. Maxine Waters and some 30 other Democratic legislators seem to be trying to start an insurrection outside the Department of Education. What's that about?
I mean, certainly that's what they'd be calling if it were Republicans doing it.
Right.
But yeah, they had gathered in front of the Department of Education and tried to force their way in, and an employee told them that they weren't authorized to enter. And then, of course, like, we're Congress people, we can go over where we want. But Matt, these folks, they've just gone off the rails now. They've gone off the edge. And, it's all about virtue signaling. They had their big rally the other day of no one elected Elon. Well, no one did elect Elon. But the dude that we elected said he was going to unleash Elon on all these things. So we voted for what Elon's doing. And you look and you're like, how can you be so invested in fighting against reducing government waste?
Yeah.
How can you be so invested in, they're the progressives, which means they're the ones that think, ahead. Well, maybe this thing we call the Department of Education isn't the best way to go. Shouldn't we at least talk about it instead of this knee-jerk, oh my gosh, you're trying to destroy education in our country? Well, no, the system just isn't working optimally by any stretch of the imagination. And again, or you look at USAID. Foreign aid takes people takes the money from poor people in rich countries and gives it to rich people in poor countries. But we're all about, to the left,
Right.
You're all about poor folks. You're taking their money and in many cases sending it to autocrats and oligarchs overseas. How can you justify those things? And it's almost like that they've been so just fossilized in their thinking that they can't break out of that anymore. And I actually think that's going to be the end of many of them, because I think once enough young people start looking at this and reading Mises and all these other folks, they realize those people have not a clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And this is all about political power in the end.
Thank you for watching Kibbe on Liberty. You can watch new episodes every Wednesday anywhere that you consume podcasts, on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify, whatever. Watch, click, like, check it out.